I give the floor to the representative of Algeria.
Thank you, President. I have the honor to deliver this statement on behalf of the A3+, namely Guyana, Mozambique, Sierra Leone, and my country, Algeria. We wish at the outset to thank ASG for Africa, Mrs. Marta Pobi, and Mrs. Joyce Msuya, acting USG for Humanitarian Affairs, for their update on the situation in Sudan. We welcome the participation of the permanent representative of Sudan in today's meeting. Mr. President, more than 500 days have passed since the outbreak of the deadly conflict in Sudan, a conflict that claimed tens of thousands of lives and created the world's largest hunger, protection, and displacement crisis, a conflict affecting both Sudan and neighboring countries. Despite the numerous calls made by this very Council for desescalation and the protection of civilians, we are once again appalled by the reports of attacks on Al-Fashar, attacks conducted by the Rapid Support Forces against the northern Darfur city and on the Abu Shuk and As-Salam displacement camps. We firmly condemn these attacks perpetrated by the RSF. Civilians in northern Darfur can no longer find a place to feel safe, to protect their children, to enjoy the fundamental right to a decent life. The use of heavy weaponry and the intensification of hostilities are reducing the city into rubble. Civilians are being put in danger daily by the RSF, who decided to launch renewed attacks against the months-long besieged city. The A3+ reiterate the provision of the recently adopted Resolution 2736 that called on the RSF to halt their siege on Al-Fashar, a call flagrantly ignored in a time of renewed hope for the improvement of the humanitarian situation, in particular following the decision by the Sudanese government to reopen the Adri border crossing and the Dabah Road. We have been taken many steps back following the latest attacks. These renewed attacks are also worsening acute food and security levels, particularly within the IDP camp in Zamzam, where the rates of malnutrition are reaching unprecedented levels. Dear colleagues, we can no longer tolerate this violation of international law and international humanitarian law. We can no longer tolerate defiance of our resolutions, as illustrated by the RSF last attacks. We can no longer tolerate seeing civilians under siege while suffering malnutrition and unspeakable human rights violations. In this regard, we wish to underline the following points. First, there is a need to sustain the measures taken recently to facilitate humanitarian access to reach all affected civilians, including in Al-Fasher and its vicinity. Support for humanitarian efforts has to be increased by continued scaling up of the funding to the humanitarian response plan. Second, any approach to the protection of civilians must be comprehensive and fact-based, naming and holding accountable the perpetrators of all type of violation, such as those repeatedly committed by the RSF, will be a good starting point for establishing credibility of the approach. The protection of civilians will rely on continued peace and mediation effort deployed by the United Nations, the African Union, and international partners. We must continue to coordinate efforts that build on the achievement realized by the Jeddah process and enhance the strategic engagement of conflict parties. In this regard, we reiterate the need for coordination that preserves the central role of the United Nations. Third, protection of civilians also means putting an end to external interference and the support provided by external actors to the belligerent in Darfur, in direct violation of the arms embargo and the sanction regime. Fourth, ensuring that international law and human rights principles are respected by all the Sudanese parties, namely the Sudanese armed force and the RSF, is crucial. The repeated attack by the RSF and their continuing siege on Al-Fasher must be met with a firm response, a clear accountability measures. We reaffirm the need for both parties to protect women, girls, children, and all vulnerable persons deeply affected by this protracted conflict. The incidence of sexual violence is especially abhorrent, and the A3+ demands in this regard that the parties comply with the international humanitarian law obligation. Peace must prevail in Sudan. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Algeria for their statement.